Thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Big Picture Podcast. Today, I have a special guest from all the way up in New Hampshire. I'll just allow him introduce himself. Over to you, sir.
Hi, thanks. Craig Taylor here, co-founder and CEO of CyberHoot, a learning management system that teaches the world cyber literacy.
Nice. So you teach the world about cyber literacy, and putting those two words together, they sound like it's self-explanatory, but I've learned quite a bit within cybersecurity to know that cyber literacy doesn't exactly come straightforward. So why not just break it down for us and then we go from there?
Sure. So I think I use that term quite literally because generally the audience that might be listening to this understands computer literacy, reading literacy, even financial literacy. It's understanding the core concepts and the foundations of the particular material. And unfortunately, in the world we live in today, there's not enough cyber literacy. We see a lot of graduates from even Ivy League schools or any university or even any high school. And the users, the individuals that we're hiring into our companies, they're computer literate. They can operate a mouse and a calendar and an email, but they can't do it confidently, efficiently, and securely because they're afraid of clicking. They're afraid of making mistakes. They don't understand how phishing happens, why password hygiene is so critical, or why adopting multi-factor or in the latest and greatest pass keys is so important to protecting our online identities. So the cyber literacy skills that we're trying to teach at my company and across the industry of cybersecurity are really foundational, fundamental knowledge to keep our companies safe. And the evidence that we're not doing enough, we're not doing it well, is the news. The news media covers breaches and exposures and companies that have lost their foundation, their core knowledge and data. It's happening every day. It just is an epidemic and it's growing. Did you know the third largest economy last year was cybercrime? First was the US government, the US, the second was China. Third was not a country, but cybercrime. And it's predicted by certain pundits in the industry that cybercrime will grow to $20 trillion in breach, monetary value within the next decade or less. It's a rampant problem.
Wow. In any field, knowing the fundamentals is what everyone would basically tell you have to be able to understand. If you want to become a surgeon, you have to know the fundamentals of how the human body works. If you want to become a carpenter, you have to know the fundamentals of wood, different types of wood, and so on. But people see cybersecurity as something that they don't necessarily have to know fundamentals about because how bad could it get? What more could I possibly know about how to use a computer? No, it goes way beyond using a computer. Did you know that you could get a phishing email now in 2025 that would guarantee that you're going to 99% click on that phishing email because an AI system figured out what you like, what you don't like, simply by going through your Instagram feed? And think about all the threat actors that would pay for such AI systems to make their jobs efficient. Because threat actors are just like everybody else. They want to do their job efficiently. They want to get as many people to click on something using as little resources as possible so that they can capture a bigger target market within a shorter period of time. So knowing that there are so many things, let's just go down this phishing rabbit hole. There are so many things that you need to know about phishing, what phishing is, how phishing operates. Is that something you touch on at your company?
It is exactly that. And in order to describe what we do at our company, it's good for us to take a step back and just take a look at what the history has shown. One of the questions that we talked about asking on this show is what has changed over the last 20 to 30 years in cybersecurity? And when I gave that some thought, what has changed is the recognition by hackers that people are the weakest link. 20 years ago or more, hackers were targeting companies that didn't have a firewall or didn't have antivirus or there wasn't EDR, endpoint detection and response back then. They were exploiting the weaknesses in our infrastructure and our computing systems, our networks. But that changed about 2003. At least according to Verizon's data breach report, it said the number one breach method was phishing back in 2003. And the second was very closely weak passwords or password hygiene. Fast forward to 2023, and Verizon did another multi-dimensional review of the last 20 years. And they said, what has changed over 20 years? And they came to the conclusion that nothing really. The same attacks are working in 2023 as worked in 2003. It was exploiting humans, the human firewall, with phishing as the number one method, and then password hygiene as the second. So a lack of multi-factor protections, a lack of passkey adoption, and reusing passwords everywhere you go. So the forms of attack, but they did make this caveat. They said, what has changed is the frequency of phishing attacks, the sophistication of the attacks. They were starting to see AI and some spear phishing and targeted attacks, and the damage that occurs once a phisher has successfully invaded a network. In other words, the payloads are much more complicated, much more devastating and damaging, whereas 6 or 7 years ago, a ransomware attack would just encrypt your files. Now, the malware is extracting that data to the cloud, to hacker forums, so that not only are they encrypting it so you have no access, but they're threatening to release it to the public. And that can be very damaging if you're a law firm or accounting firm or any of these, different forms of companies with healthcare, finance. They have a lot of personal information that can be extremely damaging. In other words, if they release your social security, you can't get a new one. It's forever in the public domain. And that happened recently with the NPD breach last fall. My social security number was in it. Most Americans' social security numbers were in that data breach. We can't get a new number like we can get a new credit card. We can't get a new social. So when they breach this stuff, it's really, really bad. And so that, I think, is the fundamental recognition we need to go to. Now, if I can pivot to your original question, which was, does my company help with phishing? And we absolutely do. Cybersecurity, would you agree, Bidemi, that cybersecurity is an emerging field of study? It's been around for 25 years, but when you compare it to medicine, 150, 200 years. Law, 1,000 years, right? Yep. Going back to the Magna Carta in England. 25 years, not a long time. And there are some fundamental problems in the way the industry approaches cyber literacy. If you've ever worked in a company, and people listening to this, you might agree, you might have a personal sensitive nerve touched on this point, but the entire industry has focused in the last 20 years on fake email phish testing. That is fundamentally the wrong approach. Put into my background 30 years ago was a psychology degree. I studied operant conditioning, and people are like, "Oh, you're losing me, Craig. What is that?" It's very simple. Positive and negative reinforcement theory.
Right.
When you use negative reinforcement theory, that's like putting a shock collar on a dog. And when they make a mistake, you zap them, and the dog says, "Oh, I don't want to do that." Or there's an invisible fence, and they go near it, they get zapped, so they don't go across that invisible fence. That's negative reinforcement. It's meant to reduce bad behaviors.
Right.
Okay. But if there's a squirrel, a rabbit, or a skunk across the road, that dog is still going to blast through that fence, invisible fence, and go try to catch that animal because they don't care about the shock in the moment. And I hate to do this analogy, but employees are not much different when they have negative fake email phish testing that punishes them when they click on those links, when they're being tested by their IT department, because they're becoming anxious and fearful and afraid of their email. It doesn't teach them the good behaviors you want to increase. And so many years ago now, we at CyberHoot have taken a positive reinforcement approach. In other words, you can also train a dog with treats. You can go to the dog park and you can reward the good behaviors that you want to encourage more of. The dog loves it. The owner loves it. And if you believe American Idol, Hurricane won the whole thing a couple of years ago with his trainer giving their dog treats to do this elaborate, beautiful routine. And employees appreciate being taught how phishing works by encouraging good behaviors, like looking at that sender. You started off with an example that said 99% clickable phishing, targeted phishing attack on an individual. I would disagree with that entirely, because the domain name from which that phishing attack is coming from is clearly identifiable to the end user if you know what to look for. You might be getting an email that purports to be from Netflix, for example, and it might just be missing an I. And if you teach people to look for typo squatted domain names, that's a fancy way of saying there's a single letter difference. It might simply be your domain name has an S on the end or a period in the middle. And you would then be likely to click on it if you don't understand how phishing works. They can't email you from netflix.com to say your account is unfunded, the credit card was rejected, you're going to lose access to your Netflix immediately if you don't solve this problem. People panic. It's an emotional response. And when you respond to things without thinking, you're more likely to click. Hackers know that. Security researchers know that. So if you teach and reward your employees for doing the right things of looking at the sender, looking at the greeting, looking at the emotionality and urgency that hackers use to get you to react without thinking, you're going to increase the confidence, efficiency, and security of your endpoint end users. That is true cyber literacy. Punishing bad behaviors does not create cyber literacy. It erodes goodwill with the IT department because they're supposed to help me, but they're killing me here. Why am I taking 45-minute video because I clicked on something and I didn't know why? I don't know that I clicked. I don't even remember what I clicked on. I failed it 2 days ago. And now I got to take this training because I failed the test. I didn't know I was being tested. That's a problematic approach.
Wow. Wow. I wrote about this topic a few weeks ago saying employees are getting fed up of all these mean phishing tests. And you think you're solving a problem, but you're actually basically now saying if everything is a 5-alarm fire, how about I don't even interact with any email, whether test or not test, coming from the IT department? Because if now they're warning everyone about ransomware attacks, I see the email, I just delete it because it could be a test. And I know what happened the last time. I mistakenly clicked on something that came from the IT department. I was trying to delete it. My computer was lagging. And then I clicked on a link in the email. And now you said I failed the test. Really?
Exactly. So there is an alternative that most companies don't recognize. And trust me when I say to you, Bid, I've talked to cyber insurance underwriters, I've talked to security professionals, and when I demonstrate what we do with the positive reinforcement side, and when I talk to the companies that are using the tool and their emails to support that are asking, hey, support, is this a phish? I don't want to make a mistake. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't seem right. And I can't decide. And I've sweated it out for 20 minutes before I sent this to you. And I don't know, but I can't afford to make a mistake and click. My company has a 3 strikes rule and you're fired, right? That's the kinds of things that exist out there. Those same MSPs that adopt the hoot phish is what we call this positive reinforcement. They go way, way down. Those emails disappear. And the users sometimes will take a screenshot and say, hey, IT, check this out. Thanks to your Hootfish training, I can see that this is not from this domain name. It's a fake, but look at how close it was. It was like there's a dot in the middle here that shouldn't be there. So I deleted it, but I wanted you to know, I now know how to find these things confidently, efficiently, securely. Thank you for teaching me how to fish and feeding me for a lifetime. That happens time and time and time again. But the industry as a whole, they're taking their cues off the biggest companies of the world. There was a phishing vendor that was sold to Venture Vista Partners for $6 billion that does the fake email phish testing better and better and better. And it still doesn't work foundationally. I can share one more statistic before we move on.
Yes.
There's a study from the University of Zurich, Switzerland in 2020. They examined 14,000 participants at companies that were being fake email phish tested, what I call attack email phishing, for 20 months. And then after the 20 months of training with these fake emails, they measured their effectiveness and their ability to spot real phishing attacks from real third parties out on the internet, hackers and such, they concluded literally the following. Unexpectedly, we found that users were more likely to click on real world fake email phishing than less likely after this study, after all this training. And there are some technical measures and some other reasons why, but you can't use typo squatted domain names in phish testing today. You have to use domains that are totally unrelated to the vendor you're impersonating, because legally you can't do those things. And it leads to this artificial confidence in end users. Oh, just look for this special domain name, and you know that it's coming from our fake email phish testing, and you'll never fall victim to it again. But it's not teaching them how to phish. It's maybe feeding them a fish for today, hoping they won't click later today. But it erodes goodwill. The metrics are terrible. It just doesn't work. And the whole industry is hell-bent on that approach. And if it worked really well, guess what? We wouldn't be seeing all these breaches in the media and news, right? If we had solved this problem. So that's where, 10 years ago, I co-founded CyberHoot, and I really said, we've got to do a better job of this. And we came up with this positive reinforcement technique that, you get 100% of metrics for every user taking it, because you remind people over and over until they do the phishing assignment. And it's super realistic to what hackers do. It really addresses that critical issue.
Nice. So going into Hootfish and how you use positive reinforcement to build around these training programs. You kind of touched on why generic training does not work, and why you haven't touched on why learning management systems and cybersecurity specific learning management system. So to start with, what's an LMS? How does a cybersecurity focused learning management system work, and how does that tie back into positive reinforcement for phishing tests?
Thank you for that. So at its core, learning management systems can send training of any kind. Usually it's delivered via videos or documents that you must read and sign off on. We do all of that. We build a unique program each year. All the vendors do a pretty good job of this. Some are using AI to produce videos. Some are using Hollywood style development of videos that are entertaining. That's pretty much the norm across the industry. And they all do a pretty good job of entertaining people. However, many people, like you said earlier, when you get an email from IT, you've been turned off on doing anything with it because it could be a phishing test, or if it's a video you have to watch, you press play, you go to the coffee room and get a coffee, and when it comes back, the video's hopefully done, and you can answer a few questions and move on with your day. It's not effective because it's not interactive. All of these LMSs, if you send a video, people can't guarantee that they're paying attention or watching it unless you're, unless you're in the cockpit of a Tesla or one of these other self-driving vehicles. They have your eyeballs that they watch, and if you're looking over here, all alarms going off, like you're not piloting the vehicle anymore. And that's what we could do to solve this problem. Like if you could have your computer monitor your eyes, that might be an LMS improvement. But they all send these videos or documents that you read through, and then you answer a quiz and you pass. That may or may not teach individuals cyber literacy skills because, let's face it, some people can zone out or not listen or not watch. What really makes an interactive, entertaining, and there was another person I listened to recently that does cyber escape rooms. And you have no choice but to participate throughout the exercise when it's an escape room, and you could perish in the escape room theoretically, like it's a game. But they've turned the literacy of videos and that sort of thing into a game to make it more interactive, to have more engagement with the audience. And that's what's really key is gamification, engagement, getting the eyeballs to pay attention and learn these fundamental skill sets. And that really makes a difference in those LMSs of the world in delivering that training. With the Hootfish, you can't pass it by clicking play. You actually have to go through and select and click on the things throughout the email that are suspicious or safe. And in doing so, you're basically constructing a puzzle. I like to call it the puzzle of phishing. There's only 6 or 7 pieces of this puzzle. But when you've gone through this exercise a couple of times, you now have a crystal clear picture of all 7 pieces of the puzzle constructed into what is a phish.
Hmm.
And when you have that what is a phish in your mind, when you're looking at your email, you can quickly determine something's off here. Oh, let me check the first thing, second thing. Oh, wait a minute. Look at this artificial urgency and emotionality here. That is really suspect. But it came from a trusted friend of mine in their own email account. So maybe before I click on that link, I'm going to call them. And you call them, and all of a sudden they say, oh, don't click. Oh my God, someone got into my email and sent emails to all my contacts. You're so lucky you didn't click because something wasn't right, you know? And so we're teaching those fundamental skills to help people avoid becoming victims. And the best news of all, Bidemi, for anyone listening to this, is it's not rocket science. We're not teaching you algebraic equations in university. We're not teaching you calculus. We're not teaching you anything super complicated. It's really some common sense applied to the correct set of questions that you practice with over and over again to get memorization in place.
Nice, nice. Thanks for breaking it down that way. So to step back a little bit from phishing emails and phishing email training, small businesses who you're very, very, I want to say just two varies, very, very familiar with. There are challenges that come with managing security for small businesses to the point where the managed security service provider industry is doing well because there is a need for their services, especially for small businesses. And of course, zooming back from 20 years ago, 30 years ago, up until now, the threat landscape has evolved. At this point, it evolves every 2 weeks. And small businesses now have to deal with the kind of security problems that the owner doesn't know the A to Z about some of these cyber attacks focused on small businesses. The IT department, if they have one, doesn't even know about the A to Z about typo squats. And they're supposed to be the IT security department for this small business. And you have a VCISO experience background. From your experience as a virtual CISO, I believe that's the
That's exactly right.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it can be fractional, virtual. It's a part-time CISO
Right.
for mid-market down.
So from your experience as a VC, what would you say are the top cybersecurity blind spots that small and medium businesses need to pay attention to 2025 going forward that would actually allow them stay in business? Because all it takes is one cyber attack and many small businesses cannot cope.
Well, I would start there's a common misnomer on the internet that's floated around for over a decade that says 60% of businesses breached, small businesses that are breached will go out of business. That is falsely untrue. Small businesses that experience a breach, in my perspective, are not paying the average breach cost that IBM throws out there, 1.3 million. They don't have that kind of money. And so they are a lot lighter on their feet. They react to these breaches quicker, and they can survive them generally at a much higher rate than that 60%. I have pulled the thread on that quote for a long, long time to find its origin, and it's totally false. There's no study that shows that actually happens. But what I can tell you, by being a vCISO at these companies, 50 plus companies our company supports today with 8 or 9 virtual CISOs in our practice, is that it's very, very painful. I've been brought into 3 or 4 wire transfers of $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 that someone's email account was breached. The hacker monitored the communications for a long time. There are 2 sides to a wire transfer, the recipient and the sender. The hacker gets in there and he cuts the sender out of the equation, or the recipient could be on either end, basically moving the conversation to a typo squatted domain name with an S on the end of it, saying, hey, our bank's under audit. Here's the banking information to wire the money. So one side of that conversation is ignorant to the change. The money is wired and it's gone. It may be enough to put some businesses out of business, but oftentimes it's just an enormously painful experience. Other times, ransomware can hit. We had another one this year, and a law firm was hit with ransomware, and 30 years of data that was on their internal network was encrypted, exfiltrated, and they spent the next 3 months sending notifications to their customers for the last 30 years saying, we were breached, your data is out there, we apologize, it won't happen again, please trust us.
Hmm.
Same thing on an accounting firm, tax season, click the link, ransomware, data exfiltrated. We have to buy identity theft insurance for everyone because we had their socials were exposed, their addresses, their financial information, which means those individuals could have identity theft on them. It is crazy, crazy impactful for these companies. They basically shut down for 2 to 3 months. And if you can't survive 2 to 3 months, yes, you'll go out of business. But most can operate herky-jerky poorly for a couple of weeks. They're down, and then a couple of weeks to 3 months, they're recovering from the incident. But it's all avoidable, Bidemi. The fact of the matter is you need to understand phishing, password hygiene. So the blind spots, you asked about that. I can go to any domain name in the world, run a dark web exposure, and see if I find the same redacted password in that domain for 3 or 4 people. And often it's the leadership of the company. And that tells me one thing. This company is not using a password manager. That means if they have 10 employees or 100 employees, they're reusing passwords everywhere they go. So all I need to do is find their VPN, get a few of the redacted passwords, understand what the full password is, and just hammer their VPN until I get in. Sometimes there's a phone will say, hey, someone's trying to log in. Do you want to approve it? And yes, no. And there's a spamming attack where you can send so many of those messages to someone in the middle of the night and they keep hitting no on their phone until, oh my God, I just hit yes by accident on my phone. I'll deal with it in the morning. And it's too late, right? Or there's ways to circumvent, SSL VPNs have all been breached in the last 3 months through the technology. It just isn't as robust as an IPsec VPN. So the sum of it is this. Password hygiene matters. It's the second most common way companies are breached. Phishing emails, and that includes spam, SMS phishing. We call it smishing, voice-based phishing. We haven't even touched on the AI of if I have 1 minute of your voice, like I could impersonate you. And I don't want to give the analogies because I don't want to jinx anybody, but I can impersonate anyone almost in real time. I think it is in real time now. 11 Labs will allow you to do that with tiny little snippets of voice. And I can call any family member and pretend to be anyone and saying, I've been kidnapped or I'm in trouble or I need money to get out of jail and please send it here. And people don't understand what deepfake is. They don't understand what that is. There have been wire transfers that have been done by the CFO of a company being deepfaked to the accounting person.
Right.
And the accounting person says, I was talking to the CFO. He said to change and move it here. And it wasn't him. So those are the blind spots, really. Not being up on the latest breaches, not addressing the human firewall, not adopting a real critical technology called a password manager for all your employees to make sure that because password managers are interesting. Nowadays, they alert you. They say, oh, you can't use this password. You've used it over here and over here and over here. You need to change it now. And it'll often help you change it. So it builds that password hygiene very, very quickly.
Right. I use a password manager. I don't want to plug any names and give them business. If they want to do business on my podcast, they can call me. But I digress. So I've used password managers for as long as I can remember. And it's one of those things where I tell my family members, my friends, anyone willing to listen, saying, in the long term, it's going to make your life much easier. Because now password managers, they keep upgrading the system anyway. Now you can even have a password manager that would remind you to change your password. It's already giving you the strongest possible password. You can tell it to remind you in 3 months, like most companies do. And that's for your personal password. So now you have something reminding you to change your Netflix password every 3 months. And not only can you just have passwords stored on them, you can store like credit card numbers, addresses, phone numbers, just things you would want it to alert you on if
Hmm.
they ever show up anywhere on the dark web. Some of them you
Hmm.
have to pay extra because now you're telling it to go look everywhere for where this credit card number shows up and so on. But it's just one of those things where if someone asks me what's my Facebook password, I don't know my Facebook password
I don't know mine either. Right.
because I'm not
It's just,
supposed to know it.
yeah. And it helps. May I address that comment
Yeah,
with
sure.
a couple of points? There's 3 or 4 really interesting benefits to a password manager. If you haven't been trained on phishing and you get an email that says your Facebook account needs some attention and you click on it by accident, but you're using a password manager, the website that pops up could look and feel like Facebook, but your password manager is going to go in there and it's going to be like, I don't know where you are.
I don't know this
I'm
stuff.
not going to put a password in. And that should be a trigger in you that says, something's not right here. Maybe I shouldn't have clicked. Oh my God, I'm not on Facebook.com. I'm on some other site. So it benefits by protecting you without your knowledge. The second point I wanted to make is that the change your password every 90 days is no longer the norm for any recommendation from a cybersecurity professional. In 2003, NIST published very bad advice that said change all your passwords every 90 days. And in 2017, they said that was probably a bad idea. We're going to publish some new recommendations. And just last fall, they finally published those recommendations. And you know what it said? 15 character passwords, which aren't complex. You don't have to have uppercase, lowercase, special characters, punctuation marks. None of that's necessary. Just use a pass phrase, or better yet, let your password manager create something truly random. Never reset passwords unless you have to. Keep them as long as you want because people are creatures of habit. When you force them to change their passwords, they start cheating and they put 2022 on 2023, 2024, or February, March, April, whatever month it is that they change it as a prefix, suffix on their password to think, oh, that's going to work. That doesn't work either. But they said also adopt a password manager. Make sure your master password is protected with multi-factor authentication. And that's the latest and greatest. You should not be changing your passwords everywhere you go every 90 days unless there's a reason. If you've had a click on a link or something, or you think there might have been malware on your computer, absolutely change your master password. So that's really important. I will say this. I've had dozens and dozens of people who are personal friends of mine adopt a password manager at my request. And for the first week or two, one of them, I go to Rotary. It's a international community service organization, and one of the owners of a business who's, 60s in his 60s, he owned a business. He looked at me on the first week or two, and he said, "You're sitting with me at the table for lunch." So we sit down. He's like, "Craig, I can't stand this password manager. It's so hard. That's the first phase of adopting a password manager is anger and frustration because it's changing the way you operate.
Right.
The next time I had lunch with him, 2 weeks later, he's like, "I think it's okay, Craig. It's really still troubling. I'm not sure I understand it really well, but it's getting better." Fast forward to phase 3. I love it. Craig, I can't live without this tool. How did I do 20 years of my technology company without a password manager? Thank you for forcing me through this gauntlet of difficulty and resignation and then acceptance. To a person, it always goes through that same phase. So anybody that's adopting a password manager, know that it's going to take you a few weeks to get to the, I understand it, and it helps me live my life more smoothly, effectively, efficiently. Absolutely.
Nice. So, talking about how a lot of companies go through these data breaches, and some companies get cyber insurance, some companies cannot afford cyber insurance. What are some things that businesses often get wrong when buying cyber insurance? Because I've seen so many stories of someone gets breached and then they go to the cyber insurance and then they're like, "Oh no, we can't cover that." What do you mean you can't cover that? I'm paying for cyber insurance. It's high premiums and so on and so on. So
Yeah. So the biggest one is not doing what you say you do. There's a cyber insurance questionnaire, and it has questions on it like, Do you govern your employees with a password policy, with a security incident response plan, and all these different things? And almost any company we go into as a virtual CISO, we do a risk assessment to start. We ask, where are your policies? They go, what policy? You mean my insurance policy? No, your governance policies that teach people what to do when they have discretionary controls. You can manage O365 and say you must use complex or long passwords, 15 characters. You can roll out a password manager, require everybody to do these things. But guess what? When they go sign up on a SaaS or a cloud application that doesn't have minimum password lengths or criteria to require it to meet best practices, people are using their old favorite password, and then they're putting their company data into it. So that's one thing. The second thing is not adopting a password manager. Many company insurance, well, actually, that's not tied back to insurance, is checking the box that says I train and I test my employees with awareness videos and phishing tests. When they check these boxes off, and then they go to IT and say, you have to start phish testing our employees because we said we did this. And then with traditional fake email phishing, there's a lot of complicated steps to deliver a fake email to the inbox of the user to see if they'll click. And as we've already talked about and beat that horse, there's really not a lot of benefit to that, but it's so difficult to set it up. Some IT departments, particularly in small ones, they give up and they never do it. And then the breach happens, they tie it back to a phishing email, somebody clicked, got ransomware, or someone else, remote access Trojan allowed someone directly into the network because they clicked on a link they shouldn't have. And the insurance company gets to the bottom of that and says, well, you said you did this, but you have no evidence of it. So if you're checking boxes and not doing it, you're in trouble, which again comes back to that hoot phish. It's 100% automated. We've eliminated the need to do exemptions in all your technical infrastructure, your spam filter in O365 or Google, because it's just an assignment email. And it brings you to a website where you do this checkbox, this examination of an email to identify safe and unsafe indicators, and you learn how to phish. So it qualifies. Every cyber insurance company I've talked, in fact, we're partnering with a bunch of cyber insurance companies because they see what we do and they're like, oh my God, this is so much better. You get a score for every employee doing this, not half did it by opening the email and 10% clicked and 20 or 40% didn't click, 50%, we don't know what they did. They didn't open the email, so we have no compliance score for them. It's absolutely meets any best practice, legislative control, or cyber insurance requirements. So those are a few things that cyber insurance underwriters, the cost of cyber insurance has gone up a lot over the last few years because there's so many claims, and they're tightening the screws on what companies are getting away with in terms of best practices. So don't fill that questionnaire out unless you're doing it the way you say you're doing it.
Right.
Make sure that you have the correct coverages too. Sometimes they'll say in your insurance policy, ransomware is exempt. We don't cover ransomware, or business email compromise is exempt. We'll cover like other kinds of breaches, but not these ones, because those are so closely tied to human firewall failures, people making mistakes.
Right. So we've covered phishing, we've covered the things to do and not to do. If I come to you, I'm trying to set up my small business in Tampa, Florida, and I say, oh, I know Mr. Taylor. He has 20, 25, 30, 50 years of experience in doing this, protecting my small business. How would you advise me to build my cybersecurity program for my small business from scratch, keeping in mind that the bank approved just minimal loan to run my business? I don't even have a cybersecurity budget, but I'm keeping up with the times because I listened to a podcast where Mr. Taylor was saying you have to pay attention to your cybersecurity for your small business. How would you advise me to have that program in place so that everyone that comes to buy coffee, everyone that swipes their card, everyone that, comes to interact with me in my business would at least be safe enough and keep coming back, and I'm going to have my business for a long time and hopefully retire and just make coffee for people?
Sure. So there's 2 or 3 answers to that question. First and foremost, you have to teach cyber literacy skills to your employees, but it doesn't cost as much as you might think. For one meal out a month, if you didn't go to a nice fancy dinner under $100 and you have 15 employees, you can create cyber literacy using our platform, or a number of other platforms do a reasonable job at it. You need something to be providing the video engagement, gamification, the certificates of completion like we deliver, all of that. But Hootfish is really the discriminator because it actually teaches how to fish, all very attainable for any small business. Those are the critical things you have to do, because when we do risk assessments at these companies they have nothing. They have no training, no fish testing, no password manager, no password hygiene. They just don't know. It's like the ostrich syndrome. They're putting their heads in the sand and saying, I hope I don't get breached. But it's really simple things. Ben Franklin said over 200 years ago, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. He was talking about fire prevention, preventing buildings from burning down, but it applies to cyber literacy as well. If you do this minimum modicum of cyber literacy training and one video a month, a Hootfish every 3 months, you're going to be well on your way to creating a pretty good defensive strategy. I like to use this analogy, Bid. If you live on a street and 9 out of the 10 homes are all well lit up and one is dark, who's going to break into what home as a thief? The home that's dark, right? It's inviting. I'm not going to see, there's no cameras, I can't get. So you have to do minimum essential with your SMB, your small to medium sized business, which is the awareness videos, the phishing testing. And then once you get those two, then adopt a password manager and train your users how to use it. Those 3 things will cover you for most of the common breaches approaches. Stay informed, because the 4th is probably one that's a little trickier. Your IT department needs to make sure that your firewall's up to date, you're patching your systems, you're doing EDR, and endpoint detection and response, some technical protections. Cyber insurance is good. A risk assessment from a virtual CISO would be another wonderful measure. That's starting to cost a fair amount of money for a small to medium-sized business. But what does peace of mind cost for you? If you own your business and you're hoping to retire in 10 years and you're growing your business over the course of time, do you want to hit a major speed bump with a breach and take 3 months of revenue off the table and all the embarrassment with your customers? Or do you want to proactively make your business well lit up? The doors are closed, the windows are closed, the lights are there, you've got a gate around the outside of your property. All these simple measures you can do to protect and provide you peace of mind is really important for a small business. And it's not that costly.
Another thing you've touched on over the course of your career is the importance of storytelling. You do a very good job of merging cybersecurity education with positive reinforcement, that psychology background, and now championing the fact that telling stories makes security relatable, memorable, and even fun. Can you say more about that, where storytelling sits in all of these good things you're trying to help small businesses with?
Yes. CyberHoot has an origin story that I would like to share with you and your listeners. 10 years ago, I was a virtual CISO for a company, and I got a phone call that a new employee had maxed out his or her credit card from the company, his or her personal credit card, buying gift cards to scratch the backs off and dutifully send to the president of the company. She or he was there for less than a week. And may I grab something?
Yes, please.
It was at this incident, after this incident, that I decided I have to do something about this, because it's such common sense that no one has ever taught these people. Someone goes to a new job. What do? They go on their Facebook or their personal social media account saying, I'm so excited. I got my first job out of college. I'm going to work for company X. Yep. And everybody know that I'm really excited. This is my first week. And hackers know that's the time to strike. They emailed from the president, even though the email came from outside, went to this person, and they bought
Gift
I
card.
don't know if you can see this. These
Yeah.
are
Apple
$100
Apple gift
gift
card.
cards, 25 or $6,000 in gift cards.
Wow.
And I keep this as a reminder and a storytelling advice that people fresh out of college that don't have cyber literacy training are wanting to make a good impression, but they are targeted very quickly because they haven't gotten their awareness training yet when they just started a company. Universities and high schools are not teaching cyber literacy. So they show up and they think the email from the president is from the president. And when he says, buy as many $100 gift cards, scratch the backs, take a picture, send it to me, they're like, oh my God, the president wants me to do this special project. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm really making a difference in this company.
Hmm.
And it can lead to at least $26,000 in gift cards. Now, I don't think that story is still relevant today because when you go buy 3 gift cards at Walmart or any large store and you go to pay for them, the bank won't allow you to.
Hmm.
They'll stop it. And the manager of the store will come over to you and say, why are you buying all these gift cards? If you don't have a really good explanation, like I have 3 kids and I'm buying one for each of them for their
But,
holidays,
yeah.
they're going to say, did you get an email from,
Hmm.
is this somebody at your work asking you to buy this? And yes, I have a personal friend who did that recently. And he says, Craig, I know I shouldn't have done this, but I got stopped. I tried to buy 3 gift cards and the Walmart manager came over and said, why are you buying these gift cards? And I was at first, I was like, well, it's none of your business.
Hmm.
He says to me. And I said, no, what happened next? He goes, did you by chance get an email from someone in your company asking you to buy these? And he goes, how did you know?
Hmm.
He goes, show me the emails. And he brought it up. See, this is not from your president. Look at the domain here. They even know about phishing at Walmart. It's amazing,
Nice.
right?
Nice.
But this doesn't happen. But it's still an origin story. And it still tells you you need common sense and you need to teach the hallmarks of the phishing that's going on, the different attacks that are going on today
Hmm.
in your employees right when they start. In other words, some companies I'm talking to aren't giving company access to company resources and data until after you do your awareness training and your phishing simulations, so that we know you have a modicum of cyber literacy
Wow.
before you can put your hands on the wheel of our ship or our car vehicle and drive it anywhere. You know what I mean?
Nice. So it's LinkedIn and people trying to, impress, and it's not even their fault because from my experience, people are going to use a social media platform in the most visible way possible. And I'm reading a book right now. It's called The Status Game by Will Storr. And it's
Okay.
basically describing how people would want to prove their status by any means available to them. For better or worse, LinkedIn is one of those things that it's free to start an account on LinkedIn. It's free to add people, request connections with people. You get a job and then you post on LinkedIn. And now people from your high school see where you work and what you do. It's a status generating machine and on
Yeah.
and on and on. I've seen cases where a new employee starts at the company, post on LinkedIn with their badge on their neck saying, just to show proof, because these people grow up at a time where it's not real if you cannot show a picture showing you on the beach, showing you in this new country, etc. It's not real to us if you just go to a public bathroom and you take a selfie. No. The public bathroom is in the company. Well, prove that you're in the company. Okay, here is the badge on my neck. And then I put the location of where the company is in the location tag to the picture.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, of course, every now and then I have my bad intention hat on my head, and I'm like, oh, now I know what this company's security badge looks like. And I can
Yes.
make a copy and put it on my neck, show up to the company, and I have a lot of folders in my hand, trying to struggle with them not falling.
Mm-hmm.
And then I
Yes.
walk in, someone lets me in because they see this fake badge on my neck. Guess what? I know what your fake badge looks like because someone on LinkedIn posts a picture of their day one, and that's just opening all sorts of security doors at that point. So
Yep.
it's one thing to to teach cyber literacy. It's another thing to now say, what kind of people are we employing in 2025? Where do they hang out online? What kind of posts do they make? Incorporate that into their onboarding training
Yes.
so that
Yes,
they
exactly.
know that whatever you do, if posting from within the company, do not post with someone's screen showing in the background. Do not post with a poster in the break room. Because sometimes if someone puts two and two together, they can tell what the company is working on because a
Yep.
poster showing in the background of your selfie in the break room.
Right.
And
Or
that's the
whiteboards in your
right,
office.
yeah,
Yes, all those
whiteboard.
things.
Yep, yep.
Completely agree. Even on a social, like on a virtual Zoom, which has become the norm, don't have a whiteboard in the background with your top three things you're working on because you're giving it away to anyone you meet in a video conference. No, you're absolutely right. With the video programs that we produce, we cover piggybacking. And that's what you just described. You're either piggybacking behind someone that went through a door, getting through before it closes, or tailgating, or the armful of stuff. We need to train employees about those physical security risks. That's become less critical in the SMB world, where a lot of people are working remote. They're not working in an office where this can happen, but it absolutely still happens. You also have to talk about social media usage. And, there's a lot of attacks, especially with AI. We haven't quite covered this enough yet, I think, but AI can analyze your portfolio, your social media posts, your position, and it can craft what we call spear phishing attacks that are unique to you. In other words, no one else in the company is going to get this email. It is only for this target person. And I once got a job. I'll tell you a story about 2 decades of storytelling. 2 decades ago, I went for an interview for a position at a company, and I went through the interviewer's social media and posts on Twitter, and I've heard that this individual had a veterinary bill that was exorbitant, and he was bemoaning how expensive it is to own a pet. So my first opening, build some rapport with this gentleman was, "How's your dog doing? Is he okay? I know he was in the vet recently and it was quite expensive, wasn't it?" And he was like, his jaw dropped. He's like, "How do you, some Joe off the street, know about this?" Well, did you forget you posted on Twitter that you had a very expensive vet bill? I got that job, by the way. But that's exactly the kinds of things people can take advantage of, both for good
Huh.
to get a job and for evil to send a phishing attack that says, "Here's your reimbursement. We heard you were complaining about it. Click here to accept $100 off your vet bill." Click ransomware. End of story.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
These things happen.
Yep. Yep. So, let's talk about some trends. You've been in this industry for a while. You've seen how things were. You've seen how things are now. What are some trends that you see shaping the future of cybersecurity education?
The trends are going to be, I think, if as the cybersecurity industry matures, my hope, and this at this point it's only a hope bid, that we recognize the folly of negative reinforcement theory
Hmm.
to reduce bad behaviors, and we focus more on positive reinforcement to increase good behaviors, to build knowledge and confidence and efficiency. One of the biggest benefits of the Hootfish platform is efficiency, as people now know instantly how to identify a bad email and delete it and move on with their day. Because each of us gets 5 to 10 of these a day now. It used to be one a week. Now it's daily. And you need to just confidently know, delete that, keep going. So recognizing positive reinforcement is a trend that I hope will expand over time. Recognizing that the weakest link in any cybersecurity program are the people is a second recognition that I believe that's happening, but people are still unsure, or maybe they're not educated on the best way to do that. So that's a second trend. AI is going to continue to make our lives more and more automated, but also better attacks, right? There's two sides to any emerging technology. AI can look at your social media and create a very convincing spear phishing attack. And by the way, it could be any country of the world, any non English native speaker, and that email will be perfect grammar, punctuation, spelling. It will not have some of the traditional hallmarks of a phishing attack from that perspective because AI can translate any language to any language with perfect grammar. What it can't do today, and maybe this will come in the future, is cultural norms.
Hmm.
In some cultures, you behave this way in how you talk about the world.
Right.
And when that's translated to English or vice versa, the cultural norms are lost. It's grammatically correct, but it's like, who would say that way? It's like the Queen's English in the US. We wouldn't use, the Queen's English. So there are some little nuances there. Password hygiene is about to go through another iteration. I would love to say something about passkeys. We know that multi-factor has been the gold standard for authentication, but just last fall, the FBI said don't trust SMS or any of the cell phone networks. In fact, limit your communications via SMS. Use WhatsApp or Signal. Those are two great platforms because their encryption is still AES level encryption, and it's robust today. If you fast forward 3 years, all bets are off with quantum computing breaking some of the traditional AES encryption that's out there. So when you hear quantum, if it's actually in place and it's working well and they've figured out how to scale it up, we're going to need a post cryptography, post quantum encryption standard that changes the way we do data encryption. That's going to be another big trend once quantum computing becomes the norm. But those are some of the trends that I see. AI is going to empower us, is going to be more disruptive than anything we've seen in history to this point. Bill Gates said that, and I agree. And it's going to make the development, the videos we produce at CyberHoot are using AI. The sales outreach we use AI. Our chat bot that we're going to deploy soon uses AI to suck in our database articles and answer questions 24/7. AI is going to become front and center in almost every role within a small business. It's a multiplier. If you only have enough money to run 3 people, teach them AI so they can leverage these agentic agents to do things like support and sales and develop marketing or training materials or any of these different things. It's a multiplier. So you don't actually have to hire people in those roles. But when you do hire someone, make sure they know how to work with AI.
Nice.
And we're seeing a lot of that already.
Nice. So in line with that, I feel like you've touched on this already. If you could fix one thing, just one thing in the industry today, what would it be?
I've heard, I get asked that when I sit down with business owners all the time. I can't do everything. I need to do one thing. What should it be? And I struggle between a technical solution like, well, if it's just one technology thing you can do, then adopt a password manager. But that doesn't work because I don't know that that's the biggest risk that anyone faces anymore. And it could say train and govern your employees and test them with phishing. That's another big one. We know that almost every risk assessment we do with a business, no matter what size, they aren't governing properly, they aren't training, they aren't testing, and they aren't adopting enough technology. So, but what trumps all of that, truthfully, is having a risk assessment. Start with a risk assessment of your business because every business has different data that they're protecting that makes them a target or doesn't make them a target. If you have no critical sensitive data, let's say you're manufacturing widgets and only 3 people in the company have an email address because everyone's on the floor manufacturing the widgets, then you just need to fix those 3 people's cyber literacy skills and you're probably going to protect, and maybe a little physical security, you're probably going to be in good shape. But a risk assessment does 2 things really well. It says you have finite time and finite money to address the cyber risks that you face. How do you make the decision what to focus on first, second, third? That's the purpose of a risk assessment. It could be physical risk, it could be administrative risk, it could be technical risk. You don't have a firewall, but you're connecting your internal network to the internet. Oh my God, that's the biggest risk. But I wouldn't have guessed that because everyone has a firewall today. But I had a company, a vCISO company, I had to write up a paper on why they needed a firewall in one of their offices. And they're like, we don't think we need it. The router from the internet service provider does network address translation. No one can get into our internal network. It's just use that. No, that's not enough. You need to know what's going on. Yes, the router does this thing, but you can't see into the router because it's owned by the MSP or the ISP. And you have no idea if hacks or attacks are happening. You have no visibility. You need to know what's going on in order to make intelligent decisions. So I think a risk assessment is actually one of the best things you can do to spend your finite time and money properly. And that'll also answer the question, am I spending enough time and money on things? If you do a risk assessment and you have 10, critical risks, you might say, well, the time and money I allocated to fixing things is only going to take the first 3, but you have 7 other critical risks. Guess what? You have to increase your spending, as painful as it may be, and your time investment until you get those top 10 critical risks addressed. Because otherwise, you're fish in a barrel for a hacker, right? Oh, okay, I'm in. What are we going to do with this?
Wow. This has been a real insightful conversation, and I want to just be mindful of your time and say thank you so much for a very detailed back and forth. I mean, I did more listening because I was picking up a few things. I was like, oh, really? So thanks once again. And of course, I would like to have you back on in the nearest future.
I would be honored.
To keep that conversation going, saying, what should companies pay attention now that we're in the second half of 2025, and compared to what we analyzed in the first quarter, this has changed. This is what's coming on, etc. Who knows where? We couldn't even touch on AGI. And that's to show that there is just so many things that we left untouched because, there's just so many things to talk about. So I would really appreciate you coming back on sometime soon.
I would be honored to bid. I run a peer group. I didn't even mention this, but I run a cybersecurity peer group of virtual CISOs. Not all are in CyberHoot. They're across dozens of companies. And our last meeting was on agentic AI, AI evolution, and what are the new threats that we face from AI? Because companies are getting on board and they want to adopt this AI, all these agentic agents to do different things. But take just one example, one story. Healthcare, radiologist, I can't keep up. Well, AI has a agentic agent from a company that can look at all the radiographs and say, oh, this is a high likelihood of cancer here, but not there. And to the radiologist, it's hard to tell because they're not as good as agentic agents, right? But who's asked the question of, did the patient whose radiograph you put into this agentic model, which gets slurped into the pantheon of radiology graphs that I've looked at, and now it's in there, is there a personal disclosure that you got a permission to use their radiology to put it into the large language model to say, yes, I give permission for this to come into the pantheon of radiology graphs that we compare against everything else? Or what is the bias? If 90% of the radiology reports are for white Caucasians, male and female, in our radiology, and we get Black, Hispanic, or any other thing, and it says, no, there's no cancer there, but there's a bias in the system and you're missing it because you've been trained on this body of radiology, you're liable as a company, as a healthcare provider, for not recommending someone get chemotherapy or treatment because it missed it because of a bias in your systems. There's tons and tons of these examples coming to, and we were bantering this about in our peer group, and everybody's jaws were dropping. Oh, I know about this really big bias or this major problem. Would love to come back and talk about that from from your perspective, because I know you have a fantastic understanding of AI and the disruption in workforce that it's creating. Everyone should listen to that crisis, AI and the crisis, workforce crisis. One of my favorite podcasts from the last 3 months.
Thank you so much, sir. That's you're referring to episode 380. So thanks for plugging my podcast.
It's awesome. You got to listen. If anyone is in the workforce and hasn't listened to that podcast, be prepared to both blow your mind,
Hmm.
to freak out a little bit, and to start learning AI immediately. But Demi, I just wanted to offer one little freebie to your listeners as a courtesy to being on the show. We give CyberHoot away to individuals. If you go today to cyberhoot.com/individuals, all one word, you can register for our boot camp on cyber literacy training. It's 6 videos, and one of our Hootfish exercises to begin to teach yourself how to fish and feed you for a lifetime of processing email personally and professionally. And we feel very strongly it's in our own best interest to have millions of people sign up for free, because if they like it, they're going to want to bring it to their company, to their SMB, or to their family, or to their friends, right? Someone had a difficult, personal email compromise. Send them to CyberHoot. Get some foundational training. And we believe very strongly that giving it away is in everyone's interest.
Right.
So that's a freebie out there.
Nice. Thank you so much. And this is very, it's a much needed knowledge. It's a much needed product to have, because it's only going to keep getting more complicated with every high school graduation set, every college graduation class. And now they grow up with all these distractive social media platforms. They need to be able to get into good, proper cyber hygiene. I want to say as early as middle school.
Yes.
Because think about what middle schoolers use now. There are things middle schoolers know how to do on the internet that a lot of us older folks were like, wait, you can do that?
I have to bring my phone to my son sometimes to help me understand how to do certain things.
Yep.
I'm like a Luddite sometimes, and I've been in this industry for 30 years.
Yep. So it's just some of the things that we have to start paying attention to them now, because the next HR executive trying to onboard the next generation of workforce needs to be able to set policy at the HR level before even getting into the different departments, saying, okay, this is what we need to teach these people, these newcomers to the company, so that everyone can at least start on a decent enough cyber hygiene level. So that if you want to be a developer, then go learn all the developer things and all the security that comes with that. If you want to be a financial analyst, then go learn all these financial analyst things. But at the very least, you're coming into this company, you know different things about deepfakes, you know different things about phishing emails, you know different things about SMS phishing, which is something we
Exactly
need
right.
to start teaching kids from middle school, not even high school.
Well, that's when the habits are formed, right?
Right.
I'll never forget the time my son came to me. He said, Dad, I did what you said. I had a really long password on my PlayStation Xbox or PlayStation. I forget what it was. And he goes, it was 14 characters long, but someone broke in and stole all my money. I don't have any money left. Another story for you, right?
Wow.
So I thought to myself, okay, I spelled out his name phonetically. First name. Okay, it's 7 letters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Was your password your own name? He goes, how did you know? I'm like, well, you told me it was 13 or 14 characters, and that's the length of your name. And so obviously that's what I would try to break into your account. Now you've lost all your money.
No
He
kidding.
learned a valuable lesson then, right? But that is foundational knowledge that, it's not just a long password. It has to be nothing to do with who you are. So all of those foundational skills need to go into our school system. And I'm looking for the first school bid that we can give CyberHoot away for free to the students to try and see how it's liked. because it's a positive reinforcement and it teaches some of these videos combined. I think we can quickly and easily teach cyber literacy in our youth. And if it proves that the feedback from the students was positive, we can take that to the next schools and the next schools and start to address this lack of cyber literacy in our educational system, because that's when habits are formed, is in the beginning.
Nice, nice. Thank you so much once again. It's been a pleasure talking to you and learning so much about your company and your insights into cybersecurity and phishing emails and what we can do collectively, individually, to make sure that we're not that weakest link,
Right.
Yeah.
Bid, the pleasure was all mine. You're such a comforting voice to listen to and to talk to, and you really teased out the nuggets of experience that I had to ask the right questions at the right time. So I really appreciated this interview. I think you're a master interviewer. You might have a future on 60 Minutes or one of these really professional shows, because you put everyone at ease and you have the great research. I mean, the list of questions you prepared was spot on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. I started this 4 years ago, and it's just been a journey of trial and error, learning from my own curiosity, and hearing that from you, who is much more experienced than I am. You just made my day. So you just made my week. You just made my entire quarter.
Well, that's awesome. I'll leave you with this last thought, and I've already said it in email, but you remind me of the Diary of a CEO. What's his name? Stephen.
It's Steve something. I forget his name. I listened to him as well. Yeah.
He has a similar style to you, and he's interviewed. I've got like another 5 years of podcasts to listen to catch up to today, because I started at his very first podcast. So I'm in like 2021 and I'm moving forward.
Wow.
But I'll add yours to the list too, because I really enjoyed what you did.
Thank you very much, sir. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Bid. Take care.
Bye.